All right, what's good, everybody? LB of the Boombox Guru channel. For today's video, man, I'm doing a discography review, but this is actually going to be a partial discography review. I've been wanting to do one of these on this band. I've been wanting to do one of these on this band for a long time, and unfortunately, I don't have all their studio albums, but I do have enough of their albums to where I feel like I could probably just go ahead and do like a bit of a partial discography review of the albums that I do have. I believe there's like two or three albums that I'm lacking, but I figured, you know what? Whenever I get my hands on those albums, I'll just do a part two or continuation of this video. So today I wanted to do a partial discography review of one of my favorite rock bands, which is called the WiLDHEARTS. And as you can see right here, I'm actually rocking a T-shirt with the WiLDHEARTS right here. This is like the album. This is like the cover of their first album, Earth versus the WiLDHEARTS. So I thought I would put that on. And yeah, man, the WiLDHEARTS. I think I actually heard of the band about 6 years ago, but I've really been into them for about 4 years, maybe 5 years, maybe that's the right exact date, maybe about 5 years. But how I got into this band was through a podcast that I used to listen to, and the gentleman who ran that podcast, he was a huge fan of the WiLDHEARTS, and he played a couple of their songs in one of the episodes. And I remember one of the songs stuck out to me so much that I just immediately went on the hunt to seek out WiLDHEARTS music. And I don't know if I said in the beginning, but they are an English rock band. They're from Newcastle upon Tyne in England. They've been active since 1989. They were formed by lead vocalist, guitarist, and primary songwriter Ginger Wildheart, and he has led like several different lineups. Because aside from him, the band has had a fluctuating lineup throughout its tenure. But I just know that the band has just, they know how to blend so many different styles of like hard rock, heavy metal, pop, punk rock. To that extent, man, they just do a really great job in mixing those different styles together and coming up with their own unique style that I think is one of the best in rock music. And it's unfortunate that they're not very well known over here in the States where I'm from, because I think they should be really huge over here. I think more people should know about them, which is one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this video, is to, put people's ears to this band, because they're a really great rock band. I think they should have been as big as Oasis was over here. To be quite frank, I think they were better than Oasis. I think they are better than Oasis, honestly, and I like Oasis, but unfortunately, that things didn't really pan out that way for them over here. But if you're somebody that's really into like hard rock and roll and stuff, you probably know this band, and they do have a huge cult following. Man, there are a lot of people out there that really dig this band, that really know good music, that dig the WiLDHEARTS. So yeah, I just wanted to focus on these few albums that I have. And like I said, I will get around to getting those last few records, those last two or three that I need to complete the collection as of right now. But without further ado, man, let's just go ahead and get into this video. And we're going to start, of course, with the debut album, which is Earth versus the WiLDHEARTS, released in 1993. And I actually did an album review on this album, I think about maybe a year or two ago. It was actually a pretty popular video. I got a lot of comments on it. I got quite a few views on it as well. But yeah, this was the first WiLDHEARTS album that I ever heard. My aunt actually got me this for Christmas one year. She asked me what I wanted for Christmas, and I told her that. And it was a little bit expensive. It came from Amazon. It was like $22, but it's because it was an import. Because like I said, the WiLDHEARTS aren't really known over here in the States, so it came in as an import. But it was well worth the money, and it just really furthered my journey into the band. This particular reissue is from 2010 by Lemon Records. It comes with 2 discs, and the first disc is the original album, and the second disc is a combination of like 2 EPs, Mondo Akimbo A Go Go, Don't Be Happy Just Worry, and a bunch of other B-sides that were recorded during that particular period. But this is a great rock album. This is one of the greatest 90s rock albums ever. And it's a shame that this record was not a huge success over here. I don't know what label they were signed to over in Europe, but I know over here the band was signed to East West Records. That's the original label that this album came out on. And I was just blown away. Now, As in my introduction, I told you that there were two songs that I heard prior, and one of those songs got me into the Wild Hearts, and that particular song is called Sucker Punch. That is actually on this record. I remember when I first heard that song, it sounded like the Beatles meets Motorhead. If you can imagine that, if you can just imagine for a minute the Beatles meets Motorhead, like a band that has that speed and aggression of Motorhead but has the pop melodies of the Beatles. That's what that song was. It was heavy, it was aggressive, but it was also very catchy. And that is a song that drew me in. And that's what made me want to seek out this album so bad. And from the first listen of this record, from the first track, I was totally sold. Like, yo, man, this is one of the greatest rock bands of all time. And with this record, the title and everything is kind of a homage to those like B movies from back in the day with the title Earth versus the Wild Hearts and so forth. But it's just a really good blend of hard rock, heavy metal, pop music, as well as punk rock, and it's just got this whole catchy vibe to it, man. Like everything about this record is catchy. Even traditional rock and roll. There's a lot of traditional rock and roll influences on this record as well, man. And just great musicianship. And as far as like the subject matter, like lyrically, like Ginger Wildheart, man, he takes this very kind of humorous, self-deprecating approach, but there's also a bit of a social commentary. Like for instance, the first song, Greetings from Shitsville, which is really about him talking about his decrepit neighborhood that he lives in, but he takes a very self-deprecating, humorous type of approach to it. And then you got songs like TV Tan, which is about people that pretty much just waste their lives doing nothing but sitting in front of the TV. But just a lot of great songs. I mean, Caffeine Bomb, which is very much reminiscent of the Ramones. The song called Love Shit, which is one of the many songs on here that really harkens to that kind of very traditional rock and roll sound with a little sleazy attitude to it as well. And the second disc, which features like the two EPs and the B-sides, like those songs are just as great. Like a lot of those songs like have this really nice groove to them, and the riffs just pack such a heavy punch, man. I mean, this is just an amazing record. So if you ever want to get into the Wild Hearts, I recommend starting with this record, Earth versus the Wild Hearts, the debut. And the song that I would recommend to start with is Sucker Punch, because that was definitely the one that drew me in. That is just an amazing song. This is just an amazing album. If you've never heard it, you're definitely sleeping on a masterpiece, because this is what rock music is supposed to sound like. And they kept it true, man. They kept it true to that rock sound. I enjoy this record. It's one of my favorites to listen to. So definitely, if you've never listened to the Wild Hearts, this is definitely one of those albums you need to check out to get as a gateway into the band, because it's just wonderful rock music right here. So next album is their follow-up, which was called Fuck. That was the name of the album. They spelled it differently though. They spelled it Phuq, but that was the title of the album. This was their second album, also released on East West Records. Like Earth versus the Wild Hearts, my version is it's a 2010 reissue that comes with a bonus disc of B-sides. So the interesting thing about this album was that it was actually intended to be a double album. And what happened was the label East West convinced the band that, that may not be the right approach to take with it being so early in your career to put out such an ambitious work, a double set album. So they trimmed the album down to a single record, and they spaced out all the other songs on other releases, such as like B-sides and other compilation albums and so forth. But with the second record, it's still somewhat of the same formula of Earth versus the Wild Hearts, but you can tell that there's a huge like growth in the songwriting, because the songs on here are more ambitious, they're more longer in length, and some of them almost take a very progressive nature, man, with like complex song structures and a lot more technicality in the musicianship. And I also would say that the subject matter on here is a little bit more personal, because the band was going through a lot at this time. I mean, they were pretty much on the brinks of breaking up. There was a lot of personal issues, a lot of substance abuse going on. I think leader Ginger Wildheart, I think he had attempted suicide a few times. One of the founding members, CJ Wildheart, he got fired from the band by Ginger, I think during the early recording process. So there's some songs on here that CJ did, and then others were performed by his replacement, I believe was Marquez. But all in all, despite all the turbulence that was going on, they actually managed to put out a great work. And sometimes I'm a little divided on which album I think is the best between this one and Earth versus the Wild Hearts. But I gotta say that this one showed a lot more of a musical growth. I think musically this one was better. But Earth versus the Wild Hearts is probably the easiest one to really get into. It's a little bit more accessible. This album was just a lot more ambitious, a little bit more complex, not as radio friendly as Earth versus the Wild Hearts, but still some great music. Although it's a little bit more experimental, you still get that classic Wild Hearts formula, the catchy pop tunes as well as the hard rock riffs and heavy metal punk influences. You still get all of that. But just a great record. And I'm gonna tell you, the B-sides disc is just as good, if not better, than the original album. So I highly recommend getting this version so you get all those B-sides compiled on that second disc that were recorded during this era. And funny enough, a lot of those songs were actually intended for the intended double set album vision. A lot of these B-sides were supposed to be for the double set version of the album that the band was looking forward to putting out. So in a nutshell, this reissue is in some ways the band actually getting that vision put out there. Because once you listen to the first disc, listening to the second disc is like a continuation of the album, because those B-sides flow so well with the original album, because a lot of those songs were supposed to be a double set album. But just a great disc. And in spite of the band having so many issues going on during the time, they managed to put out a very worthy follow-up to that debut. So this is definitely one to check out as well. Definitely one of their top albums of all time. I know a lot of people consider this one to be their favorite as well, but just a wonderful masterpiece of great rock and roll right here. Okay, so this next album, this is another interesting album right here. Let me move this a little closer. I don't know if you guys can hear me, but this is Fishing for More Luckies. This came out in 1995, and the reason why this album is so confusing because there's like several different versions of this record. There was a version called Fishing for Luckies. I think they came out in '94. Let me look here on Wikipedia. There's like a few different versions of this album. I think the first one came out in '94. I think the first one came out in '94, I believe, and it was like a mini album, an EP with 6 songs. And that was a fan club only release. But then the label East West decided that they wanted to put the album out to the masses so it could be available to everybody. And that was called Fishing for More Luckies, this version. But it actually got canceled. East West Records planned to release an official version of the album to be titled Fishing for More Luckies with 3 extra demo tracks. This release was completely unsanctioned by the band and was canceled. But however, there were some copies that actually got out into stores and were sold, and I believe I have one of those copies. And I didn't pay a whole lot for this either, man. I got this off of eBay, and it's real. This is a real disc. It's not a bootleg as far as I know. This is a real disc. And strangely enough, this one is more accessible than the actual sanctioned versions that the band wanted out. Like, there's several different versions. There's one Japanese edition that the band put out in '96. Then there's one that the band put out in 2010 on their label Round Records, which seems to be the most rarest, because that one comes with a bonus disc of B-sides, which I wish I could get my hands on that one, but it's kind of expensive though. But that seems to be the most rarest one. But this album actually goes along with the sophomore record, Fuck, because a lot of these songs that appear on here were actually intended to be on the double album version that the band wanted to put out. So these are some of the songs that were spreaded out on other releases. And I gotta tell you that with this one, you get even more of what the band was going for as far as their sound. Like, a lot of these songs are longer in length, but they take a more progressive rock approach. And when I say progressive rock, I don't mean like Yes or Pink Floyd. It's just the songs are a lot longer in length on here. I mean, some of these songs are like 7 minutes long, 8 minutes long. There's a version of Sky Babies on here that's like 11 minutes and 39 seconds. Like there's a lot of long songs on here that take all kinds of different directions, experimenting with different sounds and different rhythms and stuff of that nature. So you really see where the band was in that mindset at the time. They was really pushing the musical envelope forward. They were really trying to show everybody what great of a band they were. So this album it's a lot more ambitious than the second record. I mean, the songs have just got so many complex structures, and they take so many different like routes. They take so many different routes when you listen to them. They can start off this way, and then by the end of the song, it's like a different rhythm and everything. So very progressive in that nature, man, and very experimental. But one of my favorite releases on here, man, I think my favorite song on here is Schizophonic. If you want to check out any of the songs from this record, Schizophonic is one of the best ones on here. Heavy riffs, man, like just a great song. I really enjoy this record. But like I said, there's so many different versions. This one, the Fishing for More Luckies, this is the one that I see the most. And that's why I said it's quite funny that the version that was unsanctioned by the band is the one that's most easy to find. Like the Round Records one is very rare. I think you can find the Japanese edition, but all these different versions have different track listings. And there's even another version of this album that came out years later called Coupled with a different title and cover that has almost the same exact zones, except there's a few ones that don't appear on here that appear on that record. So you see where the confusion comes in, but this seems to be the most accessible one. So if you do find this version, it's a great one to have. It's a great one to have because a lot of these songs are really good. There's early versions of like some of their big hits, like let's see, Where Do the People Go? There's an early version of that on this particular one. Underkill is on here. Sky Babies, those both appear on the B-side disc on the reissue of Fuck. So it is what it is, man. But there's a lot of great songs on here that I really enjoy. So if you come across this one, definitely grab it. Definitely pick it up. A lot of great music on here as well. All right, so next album we get to is Endless and Nameless, released in 1997. And the band actually broke up not long after this record came out, and they didn't reform until like 2001, I think. And at that point, CJ Wildheart even came back into the band. Endless and Nameless, like this is a polarizing album amongst Wildheart's fans because it's a very challenging listening. It's a very challenging listen. This album takes more of an industrial, like noise rock approach, but there's a lot of distortion, a lot of feedback, a lot of static. It's not an easy listen. It's not one of the most accessible records, honestly, as far as your listening pleasure. This is one I think where at this point you really have to like the band to really appreciate this record. And I think that was the whole point of this album. I think they wanted to kind of weed out the fair weather fans and so forth, but it takes a more industrial rock approach, which was really popular at that time. A lot of noise, a lot of static, but underneath all of that static, underneath all that distortion, you still have the catchy pop and hard rock sensibilities that the Wildhearts are known for. There's a lot of, if you can get past that, you'll hear a lot of that catchiness and a lot of that melody and stuff that the Wildhearts are so good at writing. There's a catchiness to this record if you can get past that. Me, I didn't really have too much trouble getting into this album because I kind of like the weird stuff a little bit. I like when bands can kind of stretch the boundaries of what they can do musically and do something a little challenging to your ears. It did take me a couple of listens as opposed to the prior records to get into it, but once I did get into it, I actually enjoyed it. And it's actually, sometimes I could consider it one of my favorite Wildhearts albums. I actually like it. And this was a version that was released by Lemon Records, Cherry Red Records. So it comes with a bonus disc of B-sides. Personally, I think the bonus disc is better than the album. Those B-side songs just are wonderful. It's like a whole nother album, honestly. It's like you're listening to a whole nother album. And you can tell that they were all recorded within that era. Because that's one thing about the Wildhearts. When they do B-sides, their B-sides are in keeping with the theme of that particular record that they've put out. Similar to what Prince would do when he would put out B-sides in a lot of times. But just great, man. And you know, it could be that I really like industrial rock. I also like noise rock a little bit. So my taste and my appreciation for it may be different for some other people. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend starting with this one. I would say try to check out those prior records first and kind of build your way up to this one. Because starting with this one, you might be a bit put off. It might be a bit off-putting to the average ears. But I enjoy it. I enjoy the record. So yeah, you might want to start with the other records first and then build your way up to this one. But yeah, the band did break up not long after this album, and they will reconvene or reunite in the early 2000s. But I still think this is a great record. I enjoy it. You know what I'm saying? Just that, you know, it's if you go into listening to this record, just understand it might be a bit of a challenge for you because it's quite different than the prior two or three. All right, so in between that time, you know, the band reunited. I think they really put out a few EPs and so forth. But the first official Wild Hearts album that came out, studio album that came out with the new reunited lineup was Earth versus the Wild Hearts. This came out in 2003. And CJ Wildheart was actually, oh man, I got a crack right here. But anyway, CJ Wildheart was actually back in the band. He actually rejoined the band at this point. He came back. I'll be honest with you, it's a solid record. I think it's a solid comeback album. I don't really listen to it that much. I know a lot of Wild Hearts fans, long time fans, people that have been fans longer than me. They don't particularly like this album. They think that it's a bit too poppy, or they felt that the band was trying to reach for a lot of radio play, and maybe that was the case. They felt like Ginger's songwriting had fallen off at this point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I definitely don't consider it to be one of the best Wild Hearts albums, but I do think that it's solid, and it does have a few songs on here that I enjoy. You know, Nexus Icon, Vanilla Radio, which was one of the singles, Get Your Groove On, Out From the Inside, There's Only One Hell, Top of the World. Let's see here. Someone That Won't Let Me Go. There's a few tracks on here that are really good. Did this come out in 2000 well, this says 2004. I don't know. Some copyright years said 2003. This one says 2004. I don't know. I guess it depends on the label. But in any regards, yeah, it's not one of my favorites. It's not one of my favorites, but I do listen to it from time to time, and it's got some bangers on here that I really like. You know, I'm not gonna say it's a garbage record. Like, there were some fans when I was like reading up on other reviews and so forth, they were calling it like a terrible record, like one of their worst albums. I wouldn't say that. It's not one of their best, but I definitely think that, you know, it doesn't quite hold up to the same level as the prior records from that prior era. I will say that, but I think it's still one that is worth checking out and listening to and having in your collection. But yeah, Earth versus the Wild Heart, 2003, 2004, whichever year. But it's a pretty good record. You know what I'm saying? Not the best, but it's not something that's really terrible either. It's not gonna make your ears bleed, basically. But still a solid record in my opinion. Let me get a drink of water right quick. Those mouth's getting a little bit dry. All right. So this next album, this is actually a compilation album. So I guess you could say this is kind of similar to the Fishing for More Luckies. But this next one is Riff After Riff. I think this came out in 2004 too, or 2003. Not quite sure. 2003. Actually, it was 2003. So, okay, so this one actually came out before. Sorry about that. Phone's ringing. Hold up. There we go. Sorry about that, y'all. But anyway, Riff After Riff. So this is actually a compilation album. There's like a few other versions of this album that's been released, I believe. And you know what, now that I think about it, I think I was incorrect when I said that Coupled With was like another version of Fishing for Luckies. Coupled With is actually another version of Riff After Riff. So I stand corrected on that. Coupled With is actually like another version of this album. Now that I remember. Yeah, it's basically this album with a different title and different cover. But in any regards, this is a compilation album that compiles like a bunch of singles and B-sides and stuff that the band had recorded and put out during the recording of The Wild Hearts Must Be Destroyed. So that's what this album actually is compiled of. And there's different versions of it. I think the European version is more like a mini album with like 6 tracks. This version right here. This is the U.S. version, and personally, I think that this is the better version. I think this is the more superior version. This one, and maybe the Coupled With compilation that comes out a few years later. Reason being because there's like 13 songs on here. They add a lot more songs on this version, and I feel that this actually should have been the comeback album in my opinion. To me, this one was better than Earth versus. I mean, excuse me. I keep wanting to say Earth versus the Wild Hearts. To me, this one was better than the Wild Hearts Must Be Destroyed. I think this one should have been the comeback album. I think the songwriting on here was a lot better. To me, uh, it just kind of had that energy that like that the prior era, like the '90s, like Earth versus the Wild Hearts, the second album, and so forth. To me, it just had that energy of those records, as well as showcasing a new direction that the band was going into. It to me, it just had that energy of like the '90s output that the band was putting out back then. But there's a lot of good songs on here. I like every song on here, and it's also excuse me, it's also a lot heavier than the Wild Hearts Must Be Destroyed. Uh, to me, a lot of the songs are just more hard rock and heavy metal in some sense. They still have that pop catchiness to them, some of that punk attitude, some of that punk aesthetic as well. But there's a lot of great songs in here. I mean, Stormy in the North, Karma in the South. That's one of the best Wild Heart songs of all time, in my opinion. I mean, that riff, one of their best riffs are in that song, man, and just a heavy track all around. But so many great songs on here, man. Like Looking for the One, Lake of Piss, Better Than Cable, If I Decide, Bang, OCD. Let's see what else. Putting It On. Like every song on here is just amazing, man. It's just raw. It's just raw and has a bit of a grit to it that I think that was missing from the Wild Hearts Must Be Destroyed. But riff after riff, man, this is one of my favorite albums from the Wild Hearts. Even though this is actually more of a compilation album, still it flows like a normal studio record in my opinion. All those songs just fit so well together. They just gel so well. But just a great release right here. So don't overlook this one just because it's a compilation, because I'm gonna tell you it has a great collection of songs. I think some of the best songs that the Wild Hearts have ever written, in my opinion. So definitely don't overlook this one. Riff after riff. Make sure if you do get it, I recommend this version and maybe the Coupled With compilation, which is pretty much the same one with just a few added songs. But this is a great release from the Wild Hearts right here, riff after riff. So definitely check this one out if you come across it. Okay, so now we're gonna skip a few years because I don't have the albums that came out after riff after riff. I know they did the self-titled record. Then they did that one in 2009, which I can't pronounce the title. I think it's called Shootpa or something like that. I think that's what that album was called. It came out in 2009. There was also a covers album that the band released, but I don't have physical copies of those, so we're gonna skip over those and we're gonna go to another comeback album, because after the 2009 record, which I think is called Shootpa, the band broke up. The band broke up for like 10 years, and they all just went on doing their own individual things and so forth. Most notably, Ginger Wildheart, he formed his own like solo thing and put out some kind of country, kind of blues, folky kind of stuff that was really good. I've actually checked that stuff out. But the comeback album was Renaissance Man, released in 2009. And so of course when this record came out, when this album came out, I was still fairly new to the Wild Hearts. I was still a new convert to the Wild Hearts fan base. But I gotta tell you, boy, this is a really good record. Really great comeback record. Heavy. I mean, the first song that they put out was called Dislocated. I mean, that was pretty much a freaking heavy metal song. I mean, that riff was just... I remember when I first heard it, man, and when that riff came in, and then I was like, oh, man, this is so amazing. But this is a great rock album, a great hard rock record. It's heavy. It just has a lot of that attitude of everything that the band had done up to that point. So I consider it to be one of their most complete records, man. It just has all that attitude of everything that the band had done. You got the hard rock influence, you got the heavy metal, you got the you got the rock and roll, the traditional rock and roll approach. You got some of that. Uh, you got some of the like more experimentation that the band started doing with the second album and the other records between there. It just has all of that, and still they still maintain that catchy pop melody throughout the whole record. But there's just a lot of great songs on here. I like every song on here, man. Every song on here is good. Dislocated, Let 'Em Go, Diagnosis, Emergency. This is just a balls to wall, heavy hard rock album, and I like it. The more I listen to it, the more it's becoming one of my favorites, honestly. And one thing that I can say about this record is that there seems to be a sense of triumph within the vibe of the record. That's the vibe that I kind of get, because I guess you could say because the band has been through so much. They've had so many internal problems with substance abuse. They've broken up and gotten back together multiple times. And to me, there's just this sense of triumph throughout this record where it's like, the Wild Hearts are still here. No matter what they've been through, they're still here. Even in the cover art. The cover art is like a painting, a portrait of the members of, that lineup, which I consider the classic lineup of the band. And that's just what I get from it. I just get this whole sense of triumph from the music and from the imagery and everything, man. But this is a great record, and I like it. I think it's one of their best records. I was actually surprised when preparing for this video. I was seeing how there was a lot of fans that kind of didn't like this record. They're still saying that Ginger's songwriting is falling off. It's terrible. Like I said, you can consider me a fairly new Wild Hearts fan, but I thought this record was amazing. I enjoyed every bit of it. And I even still listen to it now. I'll throw it on because I just think that it's a wonderful record. So definitely don't overlook this one. Renaissance Man, released in 2019. Definitely, in my opinion, one of the best Wild Hearts album, man. To me, one of the best comeback albums ever. I mean, just a great one. Just a great comeback album from this band. So definitely check this one out whenever you get a chance. And last but definitely not least, we have the most recent Wild Hearts album, and that is 21st Century Love Songs, which was released in 2021. Really dope cover art. Little gruesome though, because that's an actual heart on the hook. Bit gruesome, but still dope in my opinion. But yeah, so this is the most recent Wild Hearts album, and as of right now, the band is on hiatus again. I think they were touring for this record, but they went on hiatus. And the message they put out, or statement that they put out, was, they did that because due to internal problems within the band. So they're on hiatus once again, and they're all doing their own individual things. But this was a really good record. This was actually slightly better than Renaissance Man. It's actually heavier, very aggressive. This is a very aggressive album because a lot of it was written during the pandemic, and that was the whole theme and influence behind this record, was a lot of what was happening during that time. So a lot of the subject matter is focusing around that and the way people were acting and the whole political climate. Because one of my favorite songs, I wish I knew the title right now, but there's one song on here where the hook is Ginger Wildheart's talking about everybody's an expert these days. I forget what song that is. I should have looked that up first, but the whole chorus is like, everybody's an expert these days. If you remember, during the pandemic, everybody was an expert on what was going on. Everybody all of a sudden was a doctor. Everybody all of a sudden knew what you needed to do to protect yourself. When, people that weren't even doctors, people that probably never even cared about health before then, all of a sudden now they trying to tell you how you're supposed to approach something. But in any regards, I just really felt that when on that particular chorus. But that was the whole influence and inspiration behind this record, was everything that was going on around that time. And the music really reflects that. Because like I said, this is heavy. This is very aggressive. I mean, there's a bit of an anger and frustration that's being let out through a lot of the music on here, man. But I really like this record. I'm spending a lot more time with it lately. So I'm starting to pick out a lot of my favorites and what I really do enjoy about the record. But in my time spent with it, that's what I really came to the conclusion of, that this was just a record that just let out a lot of frustration of what was going on during that time. And there was a lot of, I know the band members were going through a lot of mental like health issues during that time, particularly Ginger. I know he expressed some kind of alarming things on Twitter around this time that had a lot of people worried. But a lot of that seemed to be worked out through these songs on this particular record. I mean, a lot of that stuff is mentioned on here. But this was a great record, a great follow up. Again, just another addition to the Wild Hearts, what I call their triumphant comeback. I just hope that the band can work out whatever their issues they're having, and they can get back together to putting out another record sometime in the near future, man. But this was really a good record. And I kind of like the cover art, man, because it's kind of like a homage to like those old like kind of B movie horror films from back in the day, man. So, but yeah, really great record. Their most recent one, so definitely check this one out, man. I think it's one of their best records to come out in recent years as well. But yeah, that's it on my partial discography of the Wild Hearts. Like I said, I'm gonna in the meantime be working on getting those other albums that I don't have on CD and adding that to my collection. Once I do get those particular albums on CD, I will be doing a part 2, a follow up, a continuation of this video. But yes, man, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I really had fun talking about the Wild Hearts, because ever since I've discovered them, they have become one of my favorite rock bands. I listen to them on a regular basis, and you know, I just never get tired of them. They're a great rock band. I wanted to do this video because I want more people, especially over here in the States where I'm from and where I live, I want more people to know about this band. So hopefully maybe they can come here and do some shows or something, and I can catch them. But still, man, I just think a lot of people should really know about this band, because they're great. They're great musicians. They make great rock music. I think they're a band that's keeping that true form of rock music going in a lot of ways, man. They have a lot of those elements of that traditional rock and roll, as well as like punk and heavy metal and hard rock. They just mix those styles well together. So I hope you guys will check out a lot of these albums I just named, that you will check out the Wild Hearts and get more into them. But as always, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did like this video, if you could just hit that thumbs up and give me a like, because it does help with the channel. Also, be sure to hit the subscribe button and tap that bell. That way you'll be notified whenever I drop new content. I want to give a huge thank you to everybody that's been supporting the channel, that's really been watching the videos and so forth. I truly appreciate it. And as always, hope everybody has a blessed day, a blessed week, and love, peace, and music. Peace out, y'all.